Chapter 9, First Kiss. I slowly opened my eyes. Mike was standing in front of me, but not the Mike from 2021. This was young Mike, 17 years old to be exact. I was 17, or I too was 17. The day we first kissed in the beginning of our story, one of our best yet saddest stuck in another trigger they appeared to be servicing more often than usual. I was single at the time and not seeking a relationship. 2 months prior was the breakup with Jasper. It was a nasty one and needed time to heal from it. Dating someone was out of the question. Mike technically wasn't single. He began dating a girl a few weeks before. Neither one of us was in search of a committed relationship, and we valued our friendship that had grown over the past year. There was something special about Mike. I had a hard time trusting others, but with him, it was different. The energy he gave off made that feeling disappear. The connection was powerful, making it pleasant to be around. He was capable of keeping my fear in check without even knowing it. Mike had a mysterious side to him, a side I wanted more, needed more, craved more. Not just a feeling of lust or desire, but a mixture of excitement, curiosity, and yet a slightly scary hint of the unknown. An invisible rope pulled me toward him, then released at the point of getting too close. A magnet that reversed polarity just before it touched. Mike and I were standing next to the driver's side of my Mazda. We just spent the day together with our coworker Scotty. It was time for me to go since I had plans with my friends Jess and Macy. A butterfly feeling tingled in my stomach. Mike stared down at the ground and slid his foot into the stones. He seemed nervous. I glided my tongue ring across my teeth, which was a nervous habit of mine. He glanced up and fixated on my tongue ring. Staring in silence was becoming awkward. This time, I broke the ice. Have you ever kissed a girl with a tongue ring before? I blurted out the question. It just came out unexpectedly, and now I was regretting it. No, I haven't, he stuttered, with an infectious smile. I took back the feeling of regret. My heart was beating faster. Mike looked back down at his feet. Do you want to find out? I asked in a silvery voice. What has come over me? I just blurted out the words with no control. It was a compelling desire I could no longer hold back. Mike moved his eyes from the ground back to mine. I lost myself in his chocolate brown eyes. Suddenly he stepped closer, inches away from his face, close enough for me to feel his warm breath. He put one hand on my waist and the other on the side of my face. His hands were freezing, which was unusual for being warm outside. At the same time, we both leaned forward, his smooth, cold lips pressed against mine, our tongues softly caressing. Mike skimmed his fingers around the back of my neck into my hair. I shivered, goosebumps erupting over my entire body. The tingling in my stomach grew stronger. The connection between us was so sensational. It was almost natural that we were kissing, a feeling as if we had done it before. A warm vibrational sensation flowed through me. It shot from my feet up to my head. My face flushed with heat and my lips were extremely warm. I wondered if he could feel what I was feeling. Even though Mike was my comfort, I still worried about my fear. I have worked hard to keep my abilities buried deep in the darkness. Hiding them from Jasper was extremely difficult, but for the first time, this unusual feeling was telling me not to allow the fear to consume me. Let it flow. I decided not to push back yet. I allowed it to play out, lost in the warmth. Mike moved both of his hands onto my waist and pulled me in close to his body, and we continued to kiss passionately. I could taste my tropical flavored lip balm. He pulled away for a moment. I like that, Mike said softly as he licked his lips. I slithered my fingers through the back of his short, soft hair and pulled him back in, continuing to press my lips on his so he could taste it some more. Then I slowly brought my hands down to his shoulders. Now, grasping him, my nails dug into his shirt. We broke the kiss, staring into each other's eyes with a feeling of excitement. He smiled at me as I smiled back. His brown eyes twinkled with desire. Both pupils were dilating from his emotions. But then reality hit me. Mike was seeing someone, and I wasn't ready for a relationship. I wasn't ready to lose our friendship or to explore this any further. Speak, Amber, you have to tell him. I grabbed both of his hands. Mike, I whispered, I think it's best we With a dejected look across his face, I thought he knew where I was going with this, almost as if he were in my thoughts. I value our friendship, I said. You're right, he nodded in agreement. You're a good friend. He placed both of his hands on my head, but instead of kissing my lips, he gently kissed my forehead. Suddenly, the car alarm went off. I covered my ears from my hands, but it only got louder. The piercing sound was hurting so bad. Make it stop. Are you well? A little girl asked. I opened my eyes to see the barrel I'd grabbed before the darkness. I was back at camp. The trigger was over. Yeah, I'm good. Just a headache. I'll be fine. I grabbed my dove necklace. The little girl gave me a soft smile as she walked away. Sweat slid down my face. I wiped it with the back of my hand. That memory was the first and hardest decision I had to make with us. Our paths were not aligned at the time, and I was unaware he was my soulmate. It was only the beginning of the push-pull relationship. This went on for years until it finally came together. But going through my journey taught me patience and that he was worth waiting for. Mike was my everything, and I was so happy he was my soulmate. This was one of the few visions I enjoyed. It reminded me of who we were. After composing myself, I headed over to the training area as I still needed to talk to Zeke. I patiently waited by the sparring gear. He was a decent-looking man, and his hair flowed vibrantly for someone living in the woods. 5 minutes passed, and the class ended. Zeke carried the sparring gear over with his assistant. He noticed me standing here. Danny, can you give us a minute? He asked her. She placed the sparring gear down. Then she scanned me with unease, making for an uncomfortable feeling. Sure, boss, she said with a gruff, masculine voice. Zeke organized the gear. His bulky chest and broad shoulders were intimidating. Come to threaten me again? He asked. I already apologized. I picked up the sparring gear on the ground and handed it to him. Actually, I came to apologize to you, I said. He grabbed the gear and placed it in the milk crate. For telling me you would break my legs if I tapped into your thoughts again? I'd probably do the same thing if I was you. I shouldn't have invaded your mind. Well, attempted to. Something shielded me. That's never happened before. Are you some kind of demigod or something? No, I'm very human, I chuckled, although I like the sound of demigod. Evan is my best friend, he said. If he brought you here, then I need to trust that you're both here for good intentions. He ran his fingers through his sweaty hair to move the bangs back out of his eyes. The curves of his biceps were well defined, almost as big as Mike's. His chest muscles were straining against the fabric. It was quite attractive and hard not to stare at his athletic build, but I needed to keep my emotions in check and stay focused on why I was here. Well, I'm sorry for snapping, but I paused. Zeke stopped shuffling the gear and brought his eyes up to mine, waiting for me to finish my sentence. Sweat dripped down the side of his face, about to trickle into his uniquely tied goatee that sat on his solid chest. His light brown beard was tied at the base of his chin, with another band about an inch below that. His eyebrows were a thick, darker brown, and the two different eye colors were so uncommon and distinctive I couldn't help but get lost in them. My heart rate went up. Damn it, Amber, focus. Earlier, I hated this man, and now I felt some sort of physical attraction. These pregnancy hormones were out of control. It didn't help that he had similar features to Mike. I stared at the ground while fiddling with my necklace, taking a huge breath before my words flowed out. I'm sorry for tapping into your thoughts. I saw the reason you don't trust me, I stuttered. So you know then, about Zoe. I figured he would be enraged, but instead I sensed relief and ease in knowing that someone may understand why he held the anger and resentment inside. Zeke grabbed a rag to wipe the sweat off his forehead. He sat down on the bench and stared down at the ground. I sat beside him and continued to talk, feeling a little more comfortable. Evan may be right. Something inside told me this man might be a good person. I didn't see everything, but what I saw was you being treated unfairly, I said with concern. You gave her your heart and soul, and she, well, I didn't finish my thoughts. Zeke kept staring at the dirt. 20 seconds of silence went by. He continued to wipe his hands with the rag. Zoe was my world, my first genuine love. He grew quiet again and swallowed. Talking about this with a stranger couldn't be easy. One evening, Zoe hit me with the worst news. She said, I'm leaving. I've been seeing someone. I had no idea. She packed all her stuff, removed the promise ring I gave her, and placed it in my hand. She walked out while still wearing the matching earrings, fled for the city to be with. He paused, not finishing his sentence. He didn't need to. The disappointment in his tone was enough. Zeke reached into his shirt and pulled out a necklace. A gold-plated dolphin ring dangled on it. My guess was he kept it safe and close to his heart in hopes of her return. It's the little things that matter. One can hope, he said. I placed my hand on his shoulder. This was the first time he'd ever talked about what happened. It's okay, I consoled him. You don't have to say any more. I understand. We sat in silence again. I got where he was coming from. I can relate with having issues trusting people, I said. I had a few shitty relationships before I discovered that my best friend was my soulmate. Those bad relationships caused me to struggle with trust, made me weak. I was losing hope and felt defeated. I took a deep breath before continuing. I felt I was destined to be alone, believing I was the only of my kind. But then, that little bit of hope, hanging by a thin thread, kept me going. A few years ago, Mike changed everything. Our paths aligned, and our years of friendship turned into a beautiful, loving relationship. We had our union, and I could trust again. A small, hopeful smile pulled the corner of his mouth. Don't lose hope, I reminded, because that's what keeps us going. I spun my wedding band with a tender smile. Do you believe Zoe was your twin flame? His breathing became slow and weak. He looked afraid to speak, but he seemed to force out his words. As much as I want to say no after what she did to me, a gut feeling says maybe she is. But since I'm in distal, I may not be capable of union with someone. I never thought of that. Is it possible for in distal to union with another? Silence filled the air as we both just stared down at the ground. All I know is she was my first love and possibly my last, he claimed. I wasted too much of my life trying to please her. He slammed the towel down on the ground and slid both hands through his wavy brown hair. I could feel his frustration. Sorry, he said. I didn't mean to ramble on about Zoe. I'm usually not this chatty and I don't like talking about what happened, but weirdly, I felt comfortable around you. Maybe a little too relaxed. Oddly, I knew exactly what he was feeling. A familiar, trusting connection that Mike and I shared. I'm sure that one day another girl will come around and she will love you the way you deserve to be loved, I reassured. Zeke moved his eyes from the ground up to mine. This unusual desire of lust struck his face. Suddenly he leaned in. With no time to react, I felt his unusually cold, moist lips touch mine and I froze. A vibration zapped through my entire body, like what happens when Mike kisses me, but more of an electrical shock than a warm and cold flowing energy. We both jumped up quickly with wide eyes. His were glowing as mine felt mixed with hot, flaming fire and electrical sparks. What just happened? My mind was going in a million directions. I kept staring in silence as I noticed his different color eyes returning to normal. I wasn't exactly sure how to feel. Angry at him kissing me or confused that I felt something completely new with a stranger that I had just met. Did you feel... Zeke paused as I cut him off. I gotta go, I snapped. Amber, wait, he shouted. I turned around to walk away, and off in the distance was Mike, glaring as if anger was filling inside him. Mike and I locked eyes. He seen the kiss. Ugh, this day couldn't get any worse. Mike turned around and bolted toward our tent. Mike, stop. Mike, I shouted. No response. Damn it, I whispered under my breath. I knew he heard me, but he kept walking. I ran after him, and once I entered the tent, he was pacing back and forth, watching him think, but too scared to tap into his thoughts. I knew now would not be a good time to do so. Mike, I'm sorry. It's not what you think, I declared. He stopped pacing and sat down on the cot. You're mad, I asked. You have every right to be. His silence was killing me. Just say something. I sat down beside him. I explained what happened. I went over to apologize for my actions earlier, and somehow we got on the subject of his ex. He was upset, and I was trying to comfort him, and he must have been vulnerable. Next thing you know, I had no time to react, and he, Mike stopped me from my rant. I'm not mad at you, he said softly with an awkward frown. I detected his unusual expression. You're not? I asked, confused. No, I'm mad at myself, he said. I mean, I should be mad at you and Zeke, but he stopped himself from speaking out loud. Mike didn't need to say it. I heard his thoughts. He didn't feel threatened by Zeke. He knew that my loyalty lay with him and only him, but he worried that he wasn't good enough and he needed to strive better. We have a bond that can't be broken, I said. You are good enough for me. I just hope I'm good enough for you. He reached up to move a strand of my hair away from my eyes. A lot has happened over the past 24 hours, Mike said. I think we just need to get some rest. I nodded. You know I love you, right? I asked. Yes, I love you too, he said as he wrapped his arms around me. I rested my head on his shoulder and felt comforted by his warm hug. My thoughts blocked him from seeing in. I wasn't sure what that electric feeling was with Zeke, but I wasn't ready to share that with Mike yet. Everything had been crazy and I was ready for it to be over. Both of us were experiencing new feelings and sleep was definitely what we needed. We both lay down on the separated cots to take a nap. I stared at him as he stared at me. I reached my hand out to Mike and he reached out to me. He tapped into my thoughts. Come here. I slid off my cot and crawled into his, making it for a tight squeeze, but we made it work. My back pressed up against his huge chest. He wrapped his right arm around my body tightly, placing his hand on my stomach, and my fears turned into fearlessness as I fell asleep.